Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome. And if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Today, we are continuing our quick build series, where we're going to be exploring a briefly summarized character build for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. As always with our quick builds, if you ever have a build in mind that you'd like to see me explore in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments below. The concept for today's video comes from Sean Gilbert 3561, who asked to see a Swordmage from 4th edition recreated in 5e. Our Swordmage is one that struck me as something that I thought already existed. It sounds a lot like the Bladesinger Wizard. After looking a little bit closer at the Swordmage, I realized that is not quite the case. The Swordmage is a very interesting take on the Gish. They are still a Gish character who blends martial combat with arcane abilities, but they don't do it for damage. They actually do it as a defender or a tank, meant to protect their allies and sort of just soak up a lot of damage themselves. See, there are three main features that the Swordmage has. They have a sword bond, which is a lot like our Eldritch Knight weapon bond in 5e, or the Pact of the Blade feature from the Warlock class. But what really sets them apart is the fact that they gain Swordmage Aegis and Swordmage Warding. Swordmage Aegis is a class feature that grants them one of three powers, either Aegis of Assault, Aegis of Ensnarement, or Aegis of Shielding. Each of the three powers allows them to mark a target, and then they can take an immediate action that is triggered when that target hits another creature that was not the Swordmage, hence the sort of tanking and defender role. If that creature does hit someone else who isn't the Swordmage, then, depending on what Aegis they picked, they can do some pretty interesting options. Aegis of Assault allows them to teleport to the target and make a melee attack against it. Aegis of Ensnarement allows them to teleport to the target and then grant them what was called Combat Advantage. So this was a little bit more controller, and generally you'd be trying to ensnare or constrict the enemy. But the last one, that is probably the most present in defender or tanking abilities in 5e, is the Aegis of Shielding. Aegis of Shielding says that they could reduce the triggering attack's damage against the creature that was hit by an amount equal to the Swordmage's con modifier plus some bonuses. So the Swordmage Aegis was the main feature that the Swordmage got, and is going to be something that we're going to really be trying to recreate in D&D 5e. Swordmage Warding, on the other hand, the other ability, was a basic ability that allowed them to increase their AC while they were conscious and wielding a light blade or heavy blade. It showed that the Swordmage was focused on swords specifically and melee combat therein. And it really kind of sounds like our Bladesinger Wizard again, with the Blade Song feature that just boosts their AC based off of their intelligence. These are going to be the main three features that we're trying to recreate when looking at the Swordmage in D&D 5e. Starting at character creation with our lineage, we want anything to be viable for this build. If you want a free feat at level 1, then going human variant or custom lineage is obviously an option, but anything else can work just as well. And there isn't really any specific free feat that we do want at level 1, at least not for the builds that I'm going to be talking about. And yes, builds, because as far as I can tell, there are two very viable ways to recreate the Swordmage, both mechanically and thematically. There are probably more than two, but I've most likely missed them when I was trying to recreate the Swordmage for 5e. Now for our stats, because like I've said, there are two different options, our stat breakdown is going to depend on which option you take for the Swordmage. And so because of that, I'll talk about those more in each specific option as we go through it. But just know that depending on which route you take, your stats are going to vary a little bit. Starting into the actual builds now, I'm going to start with option 1. And we're not really doing a level breakdown because realistically, this could be any level breakdown. We just want to make sure that we pick up these two specific classes. Now this first option does admittedly use Unearthed Arcana. So if that's not going to fly at your table, or you just don't really like it that much as an option, then feel free to just skip this option entirely. Option 1 is to take the Hexblade Warlock and pair it with the Stone Sorcerer Unearthed Arcana. Doing this gets us, first of all, our weapon bond. We gain the Pact of the Blade feature from being a Warlock, and Hexblade works very well with the Pact of the Blade feature since the Hexblade Warlock is meant to be a Gish. Stone Sorcerer, the subclass, was also meant to be a Gish type subclass, but for the Sorcerer. It has a lot of features that pair well with martial abilities, even though they're a full Sorcerer class. So combining these two really makes us feel like a fully fleshed out Gish character who's going to run up, be very good in melee combat, but also have a lot of spells and magic to back up that martial ability. We're going to be allowed to use our charisma for our attacks because we have Hex Warrior from Hexblade, and that just allows us to synergize really well and pares down the amount of ability scores we need to worry about. In fact, like I was just talking about for our stats, going this path means that we only have to worry about Constitution and Charisma. See, the Stone Sorcerer is all about Constitution. Charisma, of course, is their spellcasting ability, but the Stone Sorcerer has really awesome Constitution-based bonuses. Starters, they have Stone's Durability, which just says that every time we take a level as a Stone Sorcerer, our hit points will increase by an extra 1 from whatever they would normally increase by. They also have one of the best unarmored defenses in the entire game of 5e. It's a shame that they never actually became a real class. That unarmored defense is a base AC of 13 plus our Constitution modifier, and we can still use a shield while we have that unarmored AC. That's absolutely insane since we want to increase our Constitution for our health, but now it would also increase our armor class. And we still get the benefits of a shield, which is just a cherry on top of this already amazing sundae. The real reason we want to go with Stone Sorcerer, though, is because we gain the Stone Aegis feature. Stone Aegis says that as a bonus action, we can grant a protective Aegis to one allied creature within 60 feet of us. That Aegis then reduces any bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage that the target would take by 2 plus our sorcerer level divided by 4. So there's a little bit of math there. That's still just straight damage reduction though, and can really add up over time. The effect lasts for 1 minute until we use it again or until we are incapacitated. In addition to this damage reduction though, we also get another ability that says when a creature we can see within 60 feet of us hits that protected target with a melee attack, we can use our reaction to teleport to an unoccupied space within 5 feet of that attacker. We can only teleport if us and the attacker are on the same surface, so we can't go up or down, but we can go horizontal, and that's perfectly fine. And then after we do make that teleport, we can make one melee weapon attack against that attacker, and if the attack hits, it deals an extra 1d10 force damage, which actually increases depending on how many levels we put into Stone Sorcery. Now that's a very large feature to get with a lot of words in there, but more or less all we have to worry about is the fact that that's kind of 2 of our Swordmage Aegises in 1. With that in mind though, that is really what makes this option so good for recreating the Swordmage, because we get that key feature. We also gain the benefit of having only Charisma and Constitution to worry about. We have the weapon bond. We do actually also gain some extra smite spells from being a Stone Sorcerer, and the Eldritch Smite Invocation if we want to pick that up as a Warlock. We also gain just other regular Warlock invocations as well as Sorcerer meta magic. This really feels overall like a more thematic recreation and gets pretty much all of our bases covered for the 4th edition features. I technically prefer this path for our Swordmage, but again, you can pick any path that you would like. Option 2, on the other hand, is a little bit more intelligence focused and a little bit more multi-ability score dependent. See, this breakdown combines the Bladesinger Wizard with the Cavalier Fighter. Like I said, Bladesinger kind of feels like what the Swordmage is supposed to be in 5th edition. It just doesn't have the Aegis/tank features that the Swordmage from 4th edition had, so we'd have to pick that up, and Cavalier Fighter is a good option for that. We won't unfortunately gain Weapon Bond from any features unless you were to, again, dip into Warlock. Don't really want to, since then we'd be spread very thin for our ability scores. And technically Eldritch Knight could give us our Weapon Bond, but then we'd miss out on our actual Aegis features that Cavalier Fighter is going to give us. Speaking of Cavalier Fighter, what are those actual Aegis features? Well, primarily they are Unwavering Mark and Warding Maneuver. See, Unwavering Mark is a little taunt type feature that says that when we hit a creature with a melee weapon attack, we can choose to mark them. And as long as that creature stays within 5 feet of us, they have disadvantage against attack rolls against anyone other than us. Also, if they do end up hitting and damaging another creature, we get a special attack against them. That can be used as a bonus action. We have advantage on the attack roll, and if we hit, it deals extra damage equal to half our fighter level. Now, the nice thing about this is that regardless of the number of creatures we can mark, we can make the special attack only a number of times equal to our strength modifier, which admittedly isn't going to be very high. However, we can mark as many creatures as we want, as many times as we want. We can have a very reliable taunt that will help protect our allies by making our enemies have disadvantage. This unwavering mark feels a little bit like the Assault Aegis, though it could also be the Aegis of Shielding depending on how you look at it. Warding Maneuver, however, the later Cavalier feature, is definitely more of the Aegis of Shielding. Warding Maneuver says that if us or a creature that we can see within 5 feet of us is hit by an attack, we can roll a d8 as a reaction if we're wielding a melee weapon or a shield. Once we roll the die, we add the number rolled to the target's AC against the attack, and if that target still hits, then the target who we were trying to protect has resistance against the attack's entire damage. That's a very nice protection feature. It just requires us to kind of be near our allies, but we can also use it on ourselves, which is kind of a bonus as well. The Aegis features that we have to work with here are a little less right on the nose from our Swordmage, but they still make us feel thematically like that defender role. The Gish part comes in from being a Blade Singer. We get a lot of cantrip economy from Blade Singer, and we also gain the Blade Song feature to give us boosted AC, movement speed, all that as well. And that feels exactly like the Swordmage warding feature that gives them their own boosted AC when wielding a sword. We sort of have that similar feature with our Blade Song. Our cantrip economy to be increased, given that we can, at level 6, replace one of our attacks with the casting of a cantrip, is also very awesome because that makes us feel like an actual Gish, blending spells and martial ability together, especially since we would probably want to use cantrips like Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade. So even though we don't have the exact features of the Swordmage Aegis abilities, we definitely feel like a defender with this build's breakdown. Some other nice bonuses is that from going high enough into Cavalier Fighter, if we wanted to, we could get 3 attacks as well as a mini Sentinel-like feature. We also gain Action Surge from being a fighter, which is really nice since we could still just cast spells regularly as a Blade Singer Wizard. We don't get a Weapon Bomb like I said, and we are more multiple ability score dependent. We'd probably want either our Dexterity or our Strength to be really good, as well as our Constitution and our Intelligence. And depending on how you like your builds, that can be a bit of a deal breaker. Alright, time to summarize our builds. We have 2 pretty clear-cut options for what we could do to recreate the Swordmage. We have our Blade Singer and Cavalier Fighter that is meant to just be very tanky and very Gish-like, blending swords and sorcery, even though we're not a sorcerer, all together to give us a powerful defender-gish. On the other hand, we have our Hexblade Warlock and Stone Sorcerer, which, even though it's an Earth Arcana, just both synergize really well together. Because they're so Charisma and Constitution focused, we only have to worry about those 2 ability scores, and all of their spellcasting features work together because both classes use Charisma as their primary spellcasting feature, and both subclasses are meant to be Gish-type characters who are supposed to walk up and blend swords and sorcery together anyways. We don't gain the cantrip economy that the Blade Singer does. We also don't gain the Blade Song buffs that Blade Singer does, but we gain a lot of other benefits, and the fact that we can do smite spells or other spellcasting in general really helps us feel like a Gish character still. So the real reason to go the Hexblade Stone Sorcerer is of course the Stone's Aegis ability, which just gives us the Swordmage Aegis feature in its entirety. We don't really gain the Aegis of Ensnarement from either path, but we're not too worried about that since that feature hasn't really appeared in D&D 5e in any context. You can obviously pick whichever of these 2 options feels more correct for you. Overall, I think both paths are a good way to recreate the ability of a Swordmage, or at the very least just create an interesting Gish type character that's meant to actually defend the party rather than be its damage dealer. Let me know what you thought of the build, or well, builds in this case though, or what you would do to change or add, or what other options to create a defender-gish / Swordmage you might have thought of that I completely missed. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.